What's poppin'? Is your boy Mike Powers. I'm sitting across the table from Chris Hansen, and he don't have police with him. Chris Hansen rose to international prominence for being the investigative journalist who would bust potential child predators on camera. Through his efforts, hundreds of children have been saved from the horrific machinations of some of the most reprehensible sexual deviants this world has ever known. You might also recognize Chris from his work on Crime Watch Daily, but now he's continuing his work to protect children with his upcoming show Takedown with Chris Hansen. Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time on the Mike Power Show, a man you do not want to see when you walk into a kitchen, a true American journalistic icon, an 8-time Emmy Award winner, Chris Have a Seat Hansen is in the building.
Thank you. That's quite a build-up. Quite a build-up indeed. I hope I can live up to that.
I'm sure you can. Thank you for taking time out of your
pleasure.
schedule
Thanks
to
for
do
having
this.
me. I appreciate it.
This is a monumental interview for the channel. Let's get right into it. May I call you Christopher?
Absolutely.
Okay, just checking. You went to Michigan State.
I did.
Right? Okay. Were you there at the same time Magic Johnson
I
there?
was in Magic Johnson's class.
Yo.
Yeah. So he got to leave early in 1979 and go make big money with the Lakers. I stayed for $3.75 an hour doing radio. However, I have run into him many, many times since, and he's a wonderful, gracious guy. I see him occasionally at MSU events or basketball games and know his brother a little bit. And great family, great guys. And they've done so much for the university. And I'm watching now Winning Time.
I was going to ask you that.
And I'm so hooked on it.
Yeah.
Because I remember, being in college
Yeah.
at the time. I remember when he and Jay Kelser got those twin Mercedes-Benz driving around. And I remember the car he had before that, which is old broke-down Buick Electra 225, deuce and a quarter, called Deuce.
Yeah.
And I remember the story, he pulls into this service station, Magic does, Irvin. And
Wait, he's trying to get fancy, Mikey. He just called him Irvin.
Well, that's what people who know him call him.
Right, they call him Irvin. They don't call him Magic.
No,
okay.
Magic. But that's what I'm told. I don't mean to pretend like I'm like this with Magic Johnson, but people who know him call him Irvin. So he pulls into this service station because his car is broke down, and they're doing him a solid. I mean, he's an icon at Michigan State. He doesn't have any money, so they're fixing up his car, and it's right around that time, when he's trying to decide what he's going to do. And the mechanic says, Magic, you going to go pro or you going to stay at Michigan State? He goes, man, I don't know whether to go for the money or stay for the honey, as the story goes. But what a great guy and a great success, and he's done so much for so many people.
What do you think about the portrayal of him on Winning Time, the Showtime?
I think it's dramatized, the whole show is, and they make it very clear. I mean, I'm sure Jerry Buss wasn't as crazy as he's portrayed, or any Jerry West or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Magic the same. But it's it's for TV. It's not a docudrama. It's not a documentary, rather. It's a dramatic scripted series. So I'm sure it's over the top in many ways.
Okay,
but
and
it's awfully good though. I'm hooked on it.
I'm hooked on it. Every Sunday night, I got to be there to see it. But I forgot to mention, production staff is in the building. We got Mo, we got Mikey, Conrad did some work in here, Zach did some work in here, so we want to give props to the production staff.
All of whom also work on Takedown when we caught the Predators a few weeks ago.
Real shit. Transition Studios in the building. Is it true that as a child you were obsessed with the Jimmy Hoffa murder?
That is very true. As a grown-up child, I suppose 14, 15 years old, Jimmy Hoffa was kidnapped from a restaurant called the Red Fox, which was about 1.5 miles from my childhood home. And I used to ride my bike up there, and they had the crime scene and FBI agents and local police and local reporters and network correspondents, and I followed this stuff, as it unraveled on TV. And I was bit by the bug back then to be a reporter. And so when I went to Michigan State, I walked over to the campus radio station and signed up, and off I went. I started.
Wow. And later in your career, did you cover the Unabomber?
I did. The Unabomber actually struck a professor at University of Michigan when I was a reporter at Channel 7 Action News, the ABC-owned station at the time, in Detroit. And if I remember correctly, the professor was James McConnell, and he did some research on, oddly enough, worms, and they'd chop up the worms and feed them to other worms, and those worms learned what the other worms were taught, and some crazy thing. Anyway, this offended somehow the Unabomber, who sent him a bomb. And it was during that that period of time, the ATF and the FBI were investigating. And I had a source who was helping me. And I believe I was, if not the first, among the first reporters in 1985 to actually use the phrase Unabomber on air as a term used for this guy.
The guy's name was Ted Kaczynski, am I right?
Ted Kaczynski, yeah. And then later continued to follow the story and did a piece when I first went to NBC. And then later when they arrested him in, I believe, 1996, 97, covered that story as well, which is obviously a big deal because his brother had turned him in with the agreement that he would not face the death penalty, that he would only face life in prison.
Did you ever have the unfortunate circumstance of being in the same room with Ted Kaczynski?
Never was in the same room. I was in the same room with his brother when he held a press conference in Washington, D.C. And it's interesting, I'll never forget in that story. So one of the things that tipped the brother off or made the brother convinced that it was Ted who was doing this, and who knows how long he actually had suspicions. But remember, he sent a manifesto to the New York Times and the Washington Post. Yeah. And there was great discussion and consternation as to whether that should be printed. Are we playing into his hands? What's going on here? And they did it because it was the socially responsible thing to do. And in there was the phrase, you can't eat your cake and have it too. Most of us think from childhoods, you can't have your cake and eat it too. But the actual saying, whoever coined it, I forget where in entomology this exists, was the way that Kaczynski said it.
Okay.
And the brother said, I think that might be Ted.
That was the tip-off. You were in the belly of the beast at NBC for a long time. Talk to my viewers about what the politics are really like behind the scenes of a major broadcast news network.
You know, I've got to just be straight up. I was never asked to change a story for political reasons, told that we are supporting a candidate, or anything like that. I mean, my stories generally, and I did some feature stories along the way, but for the most part, it was serious news, sometimes politics, but mostly crime and investigative things. And, you know, you talk about Emmys earlier, you know, the Predator investigations are largely what I'm known for. There's no question. They're iconic. They become so popular for so many reasons, spanning 3 generations. But all the Emmys, all the awards are for other stuff.
Wow.
Other stories are broken. So not one of those Emmys, and there are 2 more since you did your research. There are 10 now.
Wow. Okay.
But the none of them are for Predator, believe it or not. And the interesting story there, I think, is that it ruffled a lot of feathers in the traditional journalism world because we were doing something different. We were doing something outside the 4 corners of regular television journalism. And it raised some eyebrows. I stand by it. We continue to do it. We've, you know, developed and changed the way we do it, again, to be socially responsible. But, you know, it took viewers inside the commission of a felony and showed them something they wouldn't normally see and let them hear something they wouldn't normally hear. And that's partly what made it so compelling. Yes, there are, you know, undeniably some humorous moments amidst the darkness of it. And yes, some of these guys aren't the brightest bulbs in the drawer and they come off dopey. But we also had doctors and we had law enforcement officers in the most recent investigation, and you know this, that we shot several weeks ago, or a few weeks ago in Michigan. A police officer showed up. The vice president of a manufacturing firm surfaced. A guy showed up driving a multi-ton dump truck, all to meet a teenage boy or girl.
This guy was coming from the job? He was on the job when he came over?
He wasn't on the job, the police officer. He was off duty, and we didn't know he was a police officer when he showed up. But the interesting thing is that he was really difficult. Like, he saw me and he bolted. He was arrested, put back down. Then I had a chance to interview him, and he was snotty. And he had a sense of entitlement, like he was going to tell me how this was going to go down. And that's not going to happen. And so as I'm putting the bottle of lube in his face to ask him, what is this for? And again, he's there for a boy. And I've got the chat, right? I know what's going on here. He gets arrested and leaves. And I tell the crew, I said, you mark my words, this guy is in a position of authority. Maybe a cop, maybe a school board representative or a city councilman or something, but this guy is in a position of authority. And sure enough, they go search his vehicle, 3 guns and handcuffs, police IDs, the whole thing. So he was a cop at a small town in mid-Michigan, had been a cop in multiple other jurisdictions, and a school official. And now, since this, made headlines, people are coming out of the woodwork to say, he did this to me, he did this to my kids, and it's a whole saga unto itself.
And people want to bitch and moan about sometimes that, this looks like entrapment or...
It's not entrapment.
Listen, what you did, when you think about what you just described, and this cop, had you not and your team been in between him and that fictitious...
Yeah, and how many other times has he approached a real 15-year-old or 14-year-old or 13-year-old? And what has he done to students? This guy, Todd Baracco is his name, was a juvenile probationary officer who was in charge of monitoring troubled and vulnerable kids. So if he's going to show up on a Thursday afternoon, evening, in Goodrich, Michigan, to have sex with a 15-year-old boy. What else has he done? I'm guessing, Mikey P, that this is not his first time out. People say that, and I'm sure everybody has a first time, but this wasn't this guy's first time, I guarantee you.
When you're at a subway in New York, do certain people kind of back out slowly or take off when they see you?
Well, the subway's a whole threat assessment experience now, and not just because of what happened recently with the guy with the smoke bombs and the shooting, which was tragic and jarring, and thank God nobody was killed. But you do get on the subway, and I ride it every week, and you do look around, and you think, okay, he's cool, she's not a threat, he's cool. And I could see where nobody would be surprised by this fellow who was Frank James, who got on the subway, because there are construction workers on the subway all the time, guys with vests, different kinds of breathing apparatuses for work they do in buildings. And quite honestly, when I'm on a subway and there's some rangy character on the other end, if I've got construction guys next to me, I feel like, all right, well, between the 2 or 3 of us, if something does jump off, we can take him.
Right.
But that's the thought process now for many people in the New York subway system. Now, I've been fortunate. I mean, I've been in or around New York for 30-plus years now, and I've never had an incident. I've seen some things happen and some close calls, but I've never had anything really bad happen. And I think that's the experience of most of the 8 million people who are protected by 36,000 sworn police officers. I mean, generally, for what it is, it works pretty well. Now, we've seen a spike in crime recently, and partially because the de Blasio administration was laissez-faire when it came to cracking down on small-time crimes early in the day. And those people sometimes go on and do more serious evil things.
He skipped over the broken window theory.
Well, that is the broken window theory. It's a crime stat. And it's, the guy who's breaking a window or aggressively panhandling or urinating in public at 4:30 in the afternoon. If you take him off the street then, he's not going to be committing a more violent felony at midnight. And it works. It just does.
Right.
Now, was there profiling involved? Was that wrong? Yeah, maybe. But you ask Eric Adams what he thinks. And I guarantee you we're going to be getting back to that in New York City because he understands and can balance the rights of minorities and protecting minorities from and people of color being treated improperly by white law enforcement. He understands that. He was 20 years on the force. He faced that kind of prejudice when he was a kid. It's a different force now. And Eric Adams means business. I know him a little bit. I've hung out with him a few times, and I think he's going to be good for the city.
And let's agree, they could have gave Eric Garner a ticket.
Yeah, I mean, you look back on these things, and to be honest with you, at the time, all right, that was horrible. It was wrong. But you know, to me, having dealt with law enforcement for years as a young kid who got dusted up a few times and later as a reporter, some of this comes down to community policing. Let's just take the George Floyd incident.
Yeah.
Right? George is agitated. George wants a cigarette. George is just hanging in the neighborhood. What if that cop, who so brutally and offensively and horrifyingly put his knee on Floyd's neck and killed him? What if he had gone in and said, George, look, what do you need? And bought him 5 loose cigarettes for whatever. Now, that's not the police officer's job.
Right.
But what if he did that? How loyal of a information source might George Floyd have been forever?
Right.
What kind of a community relationship does that set, as opposed to MFers always out to get us?
You could cuss on this motherfucker.
Right.
You feel like saying motherfucker right
I can say motherfucker. I can say
Okay.
motherfucker better than you can say motherfucker. Motherfucker.
I'm not. So you're famous for catching predators.
But you know what I'm saying. I mean, some of this comes down. I mean, I can count. The latest shooting in Grand Rapids. All right, the guy disobeyed an order, but it's like this slow speed chase, right? And why you got to shoot the man in the back of the head? I mean, call for backup, circle the area. I mean, to me, that was just unnecessary.
Right.
And tragic. I mean, so what? Does that crime justify what many people see as an execution? You shoot somebody in the back of the head.
It's the execution, and this is the traffic stop. You know, Sandra Bland had the same thing. The cop wanted her to put out the cigarette. She didn't want to put out the cigarette. You know what I mean? And she ends up in jail late. And I may not know all the issues surrounding what happened after she got incarcerated, but I know that incident probably could have been de-escalated. But you're famous for catching a lot of pervs and predators. What I want to ask you about is, why do you think the Jeffrey Epstein thing went so under the radar for so long, when so many high-profile people was hanging out with this guy?
Money, power, and to be honest with you, I think the perception early on was that, okay, he's taking advantage of these girls, but they were not underage legally for sexual contact. And there were questions early on as to whether he was a creepy guy getting massages from young women and paying them for it, and they were willing participants, or was it a predatory sexual assault felony situation? It ended up being the latter. It ended up being a horrible series of crimes, victimization, human trafficking. But I'll give you an example. He did his, 12 months or whatever of weekday incarceration. Or weekend incarceration,
Right.
went to the
And
office.
was allowed
And
to
that was a
leave.
sweetheart deal,
Yeah.
right? Okay. Wrong. But he gets out, and I got people coming to me as the guy who catches predators saying, you ought to look at this case. There's more to it. And so I did. And so I'm digging into it, and I met with some of the lawyers involved representing the plaintiffs, and I met with some investigators who are working with those lawyers. And what I tried to do, to be honest with you, is set up a sting where we could get somebody in there, predator style, in the New York mansion. And the level of security was such that it was virtually impossible to do. And quite honestly, I got busy with other stories, and it was the Miami Herald and Julie K. Brown who stuck to this story as a local story in Miami day after day after day, convinced victims, survivors, to speak out publicly. And it was that series of stories, and she's written a book now, that got the U.S. attorney in New York to go to the grand jury and get an indictment, resulting in his arrest as he arrived back in New York from Paris. And without that kind of local reporting, you don't get that kind of justice. That's what made this case. Her reporting at the Miami Herald.
Now, when you talk about local reporting, and that's the Miami Herald, what about, because you had your start in local news
I spent a
on
lot
television.
of time in local
What
reporting.
has changed on the local news level since you were in Michigan?
Well, a lot has changed. I mean, technology, first of all. My second oldest son is a reporter down in Orlando now for the Fox station down there. And you know, the difference between the way things worked at my age, or when I was his age, versus what he deals with now, it's all different technologically. But I do think that there's more pressure to be live with the news right away.
Yeah.
In other words, you know, in Detroit, I was allowed. Now, I had to cover stories and breaking news and do stuff day to day. But what I would do, which is what a lot of smart reporters do today, is have a passion project. You know, and I'd keep working, chipping away at it. So in Detroit, the first one I did was a series of drug raids when crack cocaine had a grip on the city in 1986. So I was going out on these raids with this no crack task force, and I sort of embedded with these guys.
I was going to ask you about that because you were on the show American Gangsters on BET. You talked about you were covering the Chambers Brothers.
The Chambers Brothers.
Now talk to us about the Chambers Brothers for those who don't know out of Detroit.
So the Chambers Brothers were a drug gang in Detroit. They hailed out of Marietta, Arkansas, and we went down there and traced their roots back to the cotton fields down there. And they got to Detroit, and some of them had regular jobs, but they figured out pretty quickly how to turn crack cocaine into a major business. And not only that, but fortunately for law enforcement and for me, they took videos of themselves doing all kinds of stuff with their ill-gotten gains. Now, I'm on a drug raid in around 1986, and they find these tapes, which I get copies of. And I sit on them for about 18 months while the investigation continues. Once the investigation left the covert phase, I broke a 5-part story on Channel 7 Action News with these videotapes. Now, you got members of this drug gang with a laundry basket with money on, and not only was it hugely compelling in Detroit, it made national and international headlines. And so suddenly I'm dealing with, you know, the networks and people overseas and people who want to write books, and they indicted the Chambers Brothers. They all did federal time. And it was a big story. But it was my first taste of something that you get inside of a story, you see the commission of a felony, and I was a witness to the power and the compelling nature of something like that. And it stuck with me. And so when we came up with the idea to do the Predator investigation, you know, I thought it had some pretty powerful potential. And as it turns out, it did.
We were talking about Epstein before. I wanted to ask you, do you believe he committed suicide?
I do.
You do?
Yeah.
Did you ever have any doubts?
You always have doubts. I mean, you always wonder what kind of conspiracy is out there as an investigative journalist, as a curious person. But, you know, you can't keep a secret like that in. I mean, do I think that there was malfeasance and inappropriate behavior on the part of the prison staff? Yes. The MCO in Manhattan? Yeah. How does that happen? You have a high-value inmate, supposed to be monitored, had allegedly tried to commit suicide before, although half-hearted, and he's not being monitored? It was a mess.
The inference has been that he knows where the bodies are buried.
I think he does.
So many
I think when they went into that mansion and they got into that safe, I think there are pictures of people who don't want those pictures out there. I think there's been a big battle for other people named in this to keep their names out of it.
Yeah. Dershowitz comes to mind.
I don't know that to be a fact.
I just know that they talked to him.
They talked to him.
And he says that he kept
We know that there are people who've been on that plane, right? Including Bill Clinton, Dershowitz, and many other high-profile people. Now, is that because he was a wealthy guy who did investments for a lot of powerful, legitimate people? Bill Gates had met with him. Maybe he fooled them. Maybe he lured them. Maybe he groomed them as well in a way. It's nothing was great about being on that plane, as it turned out. There's a whole bunch more that's going to come out that's going to be troublesome for folks.
I just did a show about the show on A&E, Secrets of Playboy. Hugh Hefner. They had a lot of things going on in there. He filmed everybody that was allegedly. He filmed everybody. And so when girls tried to escape or go tell their story to the media, he even had famous media figures, because he's got cameras in every room of the house.
Yeah.
So now you go, he said, I'm about to drop this story on you, Hugh Hefner. And he says, but don't forget, I got this tape on you.
Right.
So
you were a visitor here at the house, at the mansion.
It was kept secret for so long because of that. But it's all coming out now, and these are all just allegations. You want to be clear to make that distinction. You sometimes get to talk to these suspects right before they get taken away. What trait or traits do you think all of these perpetrators have in common, based on your observation?
I think they break down into 3 different categories. I think there's the hardcore heavy hitter, the true predator pedophile. This guy'd be conducting himself this way, whether he was hanging out at the movie theater, the mall, the food court, trying to be a Cub Scout leader or a Little League coach. These guys can't be fixed. They're just bad guys. Whatever happened to them, whether it's the way they were born, some horrible experience, they're bad guys. They got to be locked up. There's a younger group of guys, and these guys are in their 20s, and they figure, well, she may be 13 or 14, but if it works out, they're socially inept. It's not that big of an age difference. They treat it like a Romeo and Juliet thing, right? Those guys can probably be fixed. There can be an intervention. They can have probation, monitoring, and they can have counseling and not do it again. Then there's this interesting group in the middle, and this is where the doctors and the cops and the teachers end up. There's guys who have a predisposition, an attraction toward teen boys and girls, but they wouldn't act on it without the internet, the access 24/7, the addictive nature, and the anonymity. They wouldn't say stuff like this face to face, but when they get online, they start into it, and they blur the line between fantasy and reality. And the next thing you know, they're knocking on our door.
I feel like I remember an episode where a guy got caught butt-ass naked in the garage and then came into the house. How hard is it to interview a dude who's sitting there with his weasel hanging out?
Yeah, it's fortunately the producers had put a blanket towel type thing on top of the refrigerator so I could hand it to him, and he was sitting below the counter, so I didn't have to see all that. But it's jarring, and it's you don't think he's actually going to do it. It happened twice. Once in Virginia, outside of Washington, D.C., John Kennelly, his screen name was Special Guy 29. He wasn't special, nor was he 29. And he had said online that he was a teacher, so we thought we had a teacher walking in naked. It turned out he was a one-time bus driver, school bus driver. He wasn't a teacher. But this guy leaves in shame. And remember, this is the second case we did, second investigation we did. So the police weren't there.
He got butt naked, too.
This guy got butt naked. Then he came back, and he was in a chat room the next day, and I confronted him at a McDonald's looking for another kid. Same screen name.
Whoa.
And he said to me, well, I have issues, and I'm seeing a shrink. I said, John, it's not working. And then we had another guy down at Fort Myers show up naked. Thought he was going to meet a girl. Talked about Cool Whip and a cat.
You know what would be a huge turn on for me? What? Watching you blank him, meaning the cat. She says, I don't think I want to blank the cat. Would you for me? You're going to make this 14-year-old girl perform a sex act on a cat.
And some bizarre sexual stuff.
Wait,
Marvin Lackham.
You remember the names?
I remember the names. I mean, almost 500 of these guys that I've come in contact with over the years, and there are cases that I still remember. We go back and do the podcast, Predators I've Caught, and I go back into these cases and re-examine them and figure out where the guy is now and what happened, and I really delve into it at a level that I wasn't able to do because during the investigations it often happens in a fast and furious way. So it sometimes is a challenge. I mean, I know what's going on. I've got the transcripts. I've got some background. But going back over these things years later is very interesting to me and very compelling.
What's the most outrageous explanation you think you've heard from one of these perpetrators?
I heard it again in the last investigation in Michigan a few weeks ago. As I had heard that this social media platform, you name it, whatever they were on, was a place where vulnerable girls, boys, fill in the blank, are. A friend told me about it, and I started chatting with this girl, boy, and I was worried about their well-being, and so I came here for an intervention to protect this child until their parents got home. I was going to help them. Why didn't you just call the police? Well, I was going to do that down the road. Do you have children? Yes, I do. Well, what happened if some stranger came to your house to be with your child? I wouldn't like it. Well, then why is this okay?
Right. That's Mikey, you hear this shit?
I hear
Okay, thank you. This shit is ridiculous. Have any other perpetrators ever tried to come after you after the fact, stalk you?
Only online. We've had some guys who, who've been the focus of my investigations, whether traditional predator or others who have ginned up some misinformation campaigns, attacked my social media account with bots, created, tried to create unfavorable, mojo or stories about it. And because some of these people are very good at, being able to do that.
Deflecting.
But it all goes away. I mean, you get to the bottom of it.
Did you see the movie Pulp Fiction?
I did, several times.
Do you know what was in the briefcase?
Now you got me stumped there. I'm trying to remember. I do not.
Okay. This is what I have heard.
Right.
That it's Marcellus Wallace's soul. Okay? You see that first shot in the beginning when he's talking to Bruce Willis and there's a Band-Aid on his...
Yeah.
Because they say I never read the folklore, but somebody explained it online, said there's some folklore that when you get your soul taken from you, it comes out the back of your neck. Right? And that's why he's so deadpan when he's talking the whole time. He doesn't have a soul. And so every time they open up this briefcase and it glows, right? And they go, it's the most beautiful thing I ever saw in my life. And it's supposed to be the most beautiful thing in the world is a human soul. That's unique.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I just want.
Let me dig into that.
Yeah.
It's good to know.
I just wanted to put.
Thank you. I learned something every interview I do.
I just want. Next time you got a cocktail party, you
Yeah,
can whip
I'm
that
going to bring
joint
that
out.
up.
Hey,
my oldest son's a movie buff. I'll ask him about it. He'll know. Chase will know.
Okay, so there was this thing that happened. I don't know if you heard about this or not. You may or may not have. At the Oscars, Will Smith apparently smacked somebody.
Yes,
have you heard about
I
this?
have heard about it. There was something on Twitter or Instagram or TMZ.
Somebody got
or,
slapped.
Something happened, yeah.
So Will Smith slapped the shit out of Chris Rock.
Yeah.
What did you think about that?
Well, like everybody else, I thought it was a stunt when it first happened. And I had been watching the Oscars, and it was obviously Sunday night, and I'd gone to bed early, so I was kind of half awake, half asleep by the time it got to that point. And I sort of perked up because I'm a big Chris Rock fan.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So I'm listening to him, and he tells his joke, and you look at Will Smith, and he kind of, and she shoots him that look, and he looks back, and he marches himself up there. And Cole Cox, our guy Chris Rock, right?
Yeah.
And to his credit, now you talk about somebody who's handled something with grace and with professionalism and class. I mean, that's what Chris Rock has done. Now, he'll have a field day, I imagine, at some point. But it took a minute to sink in, actually, as to the ramifications here. I mean, the man went up and assaulted, criminally assaulted, feloniously assaulted another man in front of a live television audience.
In front of the world.
In front of the world. Now, look, you can criticize the Oscar people for not acting, or, LAPD was there and they were willing to act. And I think, Chris Rock probably made the right call and let the night go on. And it was offensive to me that somebody thought they could get away with it. And I don't know what goes on between Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith. I don't pretend to have any knowledge there. But Michael Che had a good line on Weekend Update right afterwards. And first of all, Colin Jost said something about, how could you do this to, somebody who's had to sit through award shows while their spouse gets, an award, and, obviously referring to his wife. And then Michael Che says something to the effect of, well, what do you expect him to do when somebody jumps all over your wife without an NDA?
Hey, I'm surprised they didn't put Chris Rock in concussion protocol. Like, I'm surprised they didn't bring out the blue, tint like they have in the NFL and stuff. And then, and I'm gonna say this, it's a lot of. We have a mixed crowd that watches this channel from all around the world, okay? Small but mighty army, but it's a hip-hop channel for the most part. Some black people are going to get mad at me when I say this because Chris Hansen is there. That was the blackest Will Smith ever was. And when listen, you don't understand this, right? But when he went back to the seat and he started yelling, keep my wife's name out your that part, that's the blackest that Will Smith has ever been.
Yeah.
That's that, black energy right there. That keep my name out your mouth shit, that's what we say. What about other slang terms, though? If I hit you with a few slang terms, you think you would know what they meant?
Pride.
Do you know what it means when somebody say he don't believe fat meat is greasy?
Fill me in. Educate me.
It's like you can tell somebody something simple as shit,
Right?
but they just
don't
don't
get
believe.
it. Right.
Do you know what? Being,
I'll be stealing that from you.
yeah, just like when you try to tell somebody something simple and shit,
Right.
like, don't be outside after 2 o'clock in the morning and your son still wants to do it, you'd be like, you don't believe fat meat is greasy. You say that to him. Do you know what drippy means?
Drippy means cool, hip.
Yeah, pretty much. Is that close enough, right?
It's got drip.
Like you right, the drip, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Styling.
Yeah, there you go, styling and profiling. Is there ever a good reason to slap the shit out of somebody?
I would have said yes 30 years ago, but now, no.
Okay.
I mean, unless it's self-defense.
What would you have done if Will Smith would have slapped you?
I would hope I would have done the same thing that Chris Rock did.
Y'all better than me. We would have been on the ground.
Maybe.
He would have touched.
I mean, the problem is, when you do that, like when I was a young man and hanging out and doing stuff, we had this trick where like in the movies, you'd go slap a guy, but you hit your own hand.
Yeah.
And I was with a buddy of mine, and we're at some club someplace, and I missed, and I hit him. Didn't do any damage, but it was dopey. It was stupid. I shouldn't have done it. But I clipped him, and he hit me back just out of instinct, just out of reaction. And I saw a look on his face, look on my face, and he was sorry. I mean, he was really sorry, but he just did it.
Yeah.
But that's, maybe, I mean, I'll tell you this. I could get violent and whip somebody's ass if I thought my life was in danger or a loved one was in danger or if some shit went sideways on a shoot. I could defend myself. I'm pretty comfortable with that. And I would. And if somebody went after, my wife or my kids, I could handle
I saw
it.
you on IG with the boxing gloves on working out. You
Oh, yeah?
box? You box?
I don't box necessarily. It's part of my workout. I train with a guy named Robert Brace in New York, Soho. He's a pastor and former ballet dancer of some note, actually. And he has this whole program of integrating exercise and faith, and he's really good. And I didn't go there to lose weight or anything, but I did want to get more fit. And I wanted to get better posture, and I wanted to, work on my core a little bit. And these guys really get you going. I mean, he and his group of trainers, I mean, boxing and fighting is part of it. And, I know street fighting from, Detroit
From the
suburbs.
streets of Detroit.
Well, that might be exaggerating a
Getting
little bit.
busy.
But we're working, look, you got to be pretty
Hands and
hip,
feet.
Hip to be hands and
Chris
feet.
Hands
right.
and Feet
Chris
Hansen.
That's what they said in
Get
the
it
gym.
twisted.
That's what they said.
Listen, so how much would it cost? How much would they have to pay you to get in the ring and beat the shit out of Jake Paul?
Oh, I don't think they could afford that.
Yeah.
My ring fighting days. I mean, again, if I got the closest I've come was, I don't know, a year or two ago in the middle of the pandemic. I'm walking down 8th Avenue or 9th Avenue, I forget which, and just minding my own business, going about my day, and a young man is arguing with an elderly guy, probably in his 70s, and it's about politics. And somebody says something snotty, and somebody else says it, and it gets in a fit, and he pops the old man, knocks him down. And I'm standing right there, and the wife of the old man is there, the elderly man is there, and I say, "Hey, man, stop it." And he says, "Who are you?" I said, "Well, I'm Chris Hansen."
Have a seat.
Yeah, I said, "Don't make a mistake and do it again, because I will make a phone call, and your ass will be someplace where nobody will find you for 36 hours, and that I can promise you." And now I'm thinking to myself, and I tell the story later to my oldest son. He said, "Why do you even get involved in that?" I said, "It was going to go bad for this."
You told this
elderly
dude
guy.
you have a particular set of skills? That's what you said?
I said, "Back off."
He said, back. You could cuss. He said, back the fuck up.
I did. And he looked at me and he started coming. I said, "Don't make that mistake." I said, "You may get by me, but you're not going to get
Because
by
I give
the
people
next phone
nicknames.
call."
So you already Chris Have a Seat Hansen, and now you're going to be Chris Hands and Feet Hansen.
Hands and feet, Hansen.
Okay,
right.
I like
so
that.
anyway, the guy cools off, and I said, "No, just go. Just do yourself a favor and just get out of here before you get arrested." And I said, "You all right?" He goes, "So okay, go clean your man up and get him out of here." So now he's following me down the street, trying to explain, not to try to harm me, but to explain why his position was right and how the elderly man pissed him off and why he was wrong about his political statement. I said, "I don't care.
Right.
I do not care. All I tried to do was prevent you from getting into more trouble and hurting a guy who's 40 years older than you. Just get the fuck out of here and do yourself a favor, because I will call And if you don't think I have the direct number of the captain who's in charge of this precinct, then you don't know who you're talking to.
When was the first time you realized you were famous?
You know, I had a taste of it, in Lansing, because I was on air as a reporter for the NBC station when I was still a senior at Michigan State. So there was a little bit there. And stayed another year. Then in Tampa, people recognize you here and there. But it was really, when it really hit, was at the height of the Predator investigations. I had both my sons, and they were younger at the time, high school or junior high school. And we were at a Detroit Tigers game. We were back in Michigan. And we were walking through, I don't know, getting hot dogs or beer or something, and somebody recognized me. And there was just a crush of people, just an absolute crush. And we were trapped. And the kids look up. I said, "It's going to be fine." And I, graciously worked my way through it. But it was really something. And the Predator franchise, which I thought would be, when I pitched it, I thought it'd be a one-off segment on Dateline, and it grew into what it did, and all the iconic stuff, and the piece of pop culture that it is, and the important work that it is too. But it brought me to a whole different level in terms of public recognition for all the good and all the bad.
Does Chris Hansen have groupies?
I think there are TCAPers.
What the fuck is a TCAPper?
TCAPper is To Catch a Predator. That's the acronym for To Catch a Predator.
Oh, okay, like
so
the Beehive Beyonce.
They have entire social media groups and clubs and people and who follow this and talk about it on Reddit, and it's a very loyal group of people.
You were on an episode of The Boondocks?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Take your time.
You want to explain to me what you're doing here?
I came looking for booty.
You came looking for sex with an underage boy?
Oh, no, I ain't come looking for no little boys. I ain't got no milk, no cookies, nothing. I came looking for man's butt.
Yes.
And it has something to do with what's Fleece Johnson's nickname? The Booty Warrior?
Yes, I think it was
the Booty Warrior.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
That first was on what, HBO back in the day?
I think so.
Excuse me?
Oh, I know who you are, Chris Hansen. But see, I calls you Chris Hansen. I watch your TV show all the time. So you can go ahead and bring in them cameras and them police is waiting outside. It don't make me no difference. Now, I tell you what, I like you and I want you. Now, we can do this the easy way or we can do it the hard way.
Well, I never saw it when it originally came out. I heard about it, and I've obviously seen the clip and everything. But, yeah, there was that show, South Park.
South Park, yeah, that
Simpsons,
was crazy.
And South Park was funny because, my two older boys went to a high school in Connecticut, and it was no big deal to have a dad on television. There were other dads on TV, sports guys, athletes, captains of industry, you name it. Kids went to that school. But when the South Park episode came out, and the next day came, and they're in class, and there was a Chris Hansen parody, To Catch a Predator parody, suddenly I was the cool dad.
Wait a minute, this ain't no house. What are you doing? Chris Hansen! Oh no, it's a setup, I knew it! Sir, why don't you take a seat right over there? Now everyone's gonna know I'm a perv! Oh!
Well, listen, you caught the cultural zeitgeist, as they say.
Yeah.
And I love South Park because they are no holds barred.
Oh yeah,
Everybody
and they
can get
don't tell
it.
you. They don't tell you
That you're going to be on?
that you're going to be on. So in other words, I'm in San Francisco on an unrelated shoot, and I get a text from one of my agents at William Morris, and he says, South Park is doing you tonight. It's pretty funny. And I said, well, I'll watch it. I'm on a different time zone, but I'll watch it when it comes on here. About 20 minutes later, he texts, it's taken a dark turn.
Which it did because people started committing suicide.
Right, which was after the Texas investigation where an assistant district attorney surfaced, and when they went to go arrest him, he killed himself, presumably because he had child pornography and other condemning evidence on his computer, his laptop.
You like sneakers, right?
I do.
Okay. So I'm going to show you a picture.
Sure.
You know what these are?
Those Yeezys?
Can you tell me what you honestly think about those?
I don't like them.
Right.
They're ugly. As OJ said, those ugly-ass shoes. Right. Who wears these?
I don't know who wears those
Who makes them?
Kanye.
Yeah, it's not for me.
They look like a Nerf football, right?
I'm very particular. I have the same running workout shoes. I have the same shoes for tennis. And when they wear out, I just go on Amazon and order more of them.
That's official. Like Chris Hansen said, he don't like these
No.
Yeezys. Okay, good.
Take that.
You ever been to a rap show?
Yeah. And I'm trying to remember exactly what. I mean, I like all music. I'm not expert at rap or hip hop. I like it. I've talked to Snoop Dogg on the phone.
Oh, really? What was that like?
It was great. It was very gracious. I've been on Big Boy's Neighborhood in L.A.
Let me ask you this. You're quite obviously an American cultural icon. Did you know that there's at least one rap song called Chris Hansen?
Is it the Insane Clown Posse?
No,
that's
'cause
To
I was
Catch
on-
a Predator.
Right.
Which one is Chris Hansen?
It's by a guy named Lil Sausage.
Little Sausage.
Yeah, it's a real song. It's on YouTube. I'm not gonna
It
play
is?
it for yeah, it is.
I'll have to listen to that.
Yeah, it's
What's
called-
it say?
Chris Hansen, Dateline taking for some ransom. Praying on these beats like the fools on the cameras. Just glancing, bitch think I'm handsome. One time on me cause you messing with a stanza. Chris Hansen, Dateline taking for some ransom. Praying on these beats like the fools on the cameras. Just glancing, bitch think I'm handsome. One time on me cause you messing with a stanza.
It's
Is
kinda-
it good?
No. It's not that good.
Is it bad for me or just
No,
not
it's
good
not bad
music?
for you at all.
Oh, okay.
It's celebrating you. Did you know that there's a techno dubstep tribute about you on YouTube?
No.
And they mashed up a collection of you reading filthy transcripts and put it over like a
that's
dubstep
great.
beat.
Yeah.
It's really, really good. And then somebody in the comment section said, and I quote, "Play this at my funeral." Your reaction?
Well, I'm glad I touched people in that way. You know, it's people relate to this franchise in a way, and I've done a lot of compelling stories and got a lot of accolades for those stories, but nothing has ever resonated with people like the Predator investigations, and they continue to do so to this day. I mean, people cannot wait for the next one to come out.
Yeah.
And it's a very personal relationship. I think people live it with you when you confront a predator or somebody in that situation.
Who would you pick to play you in a movie?
That's a good question. Somebody younger than me and more handsome than me, probably. But whoever is the 30-something Brad Pitt, whoever that is today, that's probably who I'd.
Okay, let me do this real quick. I gotta do. Put these in front of you. All right. Now, and you tell me who said what. That's what the game we're playing right now.
All right.
Okay, so first one is, and I'm not going to do the people's voice because it's going to be too easy for you. I'm going to say it. Pink Gators, my Detroit players, Tims for my hooligans in Brooklyn. Who said that?
Biggie?
Yeah! Hey, yo! Hey, yo!
One for one.
Okay, 1 for 1. Okay, let's do the next one. First of all, I want to thank my connect, the most important person with all due respect. Thanks to the duffel bag, the brown paper bag, the Nike shoe box for holding all this cash.
Jay-Z.
Yo! So I'm not even.
So we know that
it's
Tupac
only
is
one
next.
left.
Yeah,
and I
that's
was
good.
gonna say, although I'm worldwide, baby, I ain't hard to find. Why I spend most of my time on California grind. You know that song, right?
Yeah.
Mo, you don't know that song. If you were able to interview Tupac, what do you
I
think
would
you
love to do that.
What do you think you would ask him?
Who shot you?
No, he did.
And Biggie made a song called "Who Shot You."
Yeah.
It's getting spicy. I think that's a sub disc. What was the most impactful moment from your high school years?
You know, I think it was around sophomore year. I wasn't a tremendous student in the beginning in my first year. And I went to a private boys Catholic school, Brother Rice, and they took a very deep interest in your success. And so I had a peer tutor sophomore year, and I went from a D to an A in an algebra class. And it sounds like a simple, mundane thing, not eventful. But to me, it was a sign that you could do it, that you could get over and learn something that was difficult for you. And once you did that, everything else was easy. I was always good with the language arts and reading and things like that. But to get through something like algebra, which was difficult for me, and I'm not pretending like I had some learning disability or was
I sucked
dyslexic
at
or
algebra
anything
too.
like that. But it was, for me, it was, we weren't an engineering family. We're sales and artist people. And so it gave me a great deal of confidence at a time when I was sort of coming of age and, got a better haircut and, could talk to girls for the first time. And so it all kind of mixed together along with getting a driver's license that, it created some confidence in playing football, although I was not by any means a star athlete, but playing football for a coach, Al Fracassa, who was of some note, and his assistant coaches were great guys. It just was really a great nurturing environment that gave me a sense of accomplishment and success that I needed at that very moment.
Did you go to prom?
I did.
What was the jam that year when you went to prom?
Well, let's see. I graduated in 1977.
Parliament Funkadelic, maybe?
So there was some of that. Earth, Wind, and Fire was really big.
Yeah.
And then there was the more,
Eagles.
rock and roll stuff and Eagle. Yeah.
A little bit of Zeppelin.
Yeah.
I feel
and
you.
A little Van Morrison.
Van Morrison. Marketing is a huge part of being a public figure nowadays. Like Shaq, he sells insurance, office chairs, icy hot. Are you heavily into marketing your brand?
I try to, and I work on a number of things from the podcast where we have advertisers obviously to the YouTube channel and other things. But I think the brand is very important, and I think there is a Chris Hansen brand, and I try to be somewhat careful with. Well, I try to be very careful with it because it's important, and I think if you were to ask people, I would hope they would say that the brand is important, enterprise, television, things that you don't see anywhere else, and a quality to it and an integrity to it that you don't always get everywhere else on television.
So do you have anything to do with these Chris Hansen cock blocker stickers?
I'm not getting a vig on that, no.
You haven't
I should
seen
be.
this?
No,
Do we need to talk to a lawyer?
Yeah, we should. So I'll tell you one funny story. A friend of mine who's a prosecutor in Michigan sends me a picture from the Acropolis in Greece. She's on vacation, and they're selling T-shirts that says Chris Hansen cock blocker. And how does that happen? How does a T-shirt stand in front of the Acropolis in Greece have a Chris Hansen cock blocker T-shirt? How does that? In what parallel universe could that happen?
You are the world's most famous cock blocker.
Well, I guess so.
But in a good way, though.
Yeah.
But what about... Have you seen these? I just found these today.
What is that now?
This is Chris. You are on panties. I didn't Photoshop this shit. This is on the internet.
Yeah. Well, I've seen people who have got that tattoo on their arm.
This old
that meme
you
of
peeking
me,
around
yeah.
the because that's everywhere. But you don't know anything about
who
manufactures these
I
panties.
do not. I don't know if that's Hanes or Victoria's Secret or any of that stuff. I should be getting some money.
You think Hanes is just gonna slap your face on the crotch?
I'm teasing.
Okay. Let me ask you a question. If you had to make me something to eat,
Yeah.
under threat of death, given what I look like, what would you cook? You gotta, based on what you know about me and
What I
looking
know
at
about
me.
you?
Yeah.
Short ribs.
I'll fuck with some short ribs. Yeah. Okay. I like that. What's the best way to piss you off in real life?
I try to control my general demeanor. Being inefficient pisses me off. Watching airlines operate in a way that is unnecessarily inefficient drives me crazy because I travel a lot. And that just stupid people getting other people to believe their nonsense and these conspiracy theories and QAnon. And it's just like, wake up. Some of this stuff is just pure bullshit. I get stuff all the time. You need to investigate Pizzagate. I'm like, all right, well, you give me something
Right.
that indicates there's an ounce of credibility to it, I'll investigate it.
Do you think those are Steve Harvey's real teeth?
I like him. I
like him.
I don't know.
He look like
I think he just keeps them clean because I think he's a cigar smoker, and I think guys who are on TV who enjoy cigars have a regimen for making sure that doesn't stain their teeth.
Yeah, they're big though too.
They're big.
He looked like he could eat a whole.
He's got that broad mustache.
Yeah,
I like the way he dressed. He's got some good clothes.
Oh man, I'm
He's
glad
got
he
some
switched
really
it up
good
and
clothes.
came with the more, slim down approach. Because it used to
looks
be
good.
a meme. The Steve Harvey suit used to be a meme.
Right.
Extra big, 14 buttons.
Yeah.
That type of shit. I'm glad he switched it up. If you had Jeff Bezos' money, what's the craziest purchase you think you would make?
Private jet.
Private fucking. And you would take me on a jet?
Absolutely.
That's
Anywhere you want to go.
That's what's up. Oh shit! Real quick, we about to do this. You ready? This is bootleg as fuck, Mikey. Okay, we do a hip hop channel here. I wanted you to vibe to this and tell me what you think. This is my guy. This is a guy named Splash Alka. This you want to edit out, right, Mikey?
I customize
The commercial right here. Okay.
Download the Domino's app today and
This is an underground guy. His name is Splash Alka. He's from Brooklyn. Put it closer. Can you hear it? Listen to this for a minute. See if you can vibe to this. This is called Fifth Amendment. It's apropos.
Yeah, it is.
Man, my respect. Play my hand like a vet. I ain't playing on the check. Couple grams on the set. Tryna make a million, I ain't ran through it yet. I do it for my niggas in the can doing sets. I do this for my bitches with that pussy dripping. Who be in the kitchen whipping. Hit the block and get the flipping. I ain't tripping, bitch, I'm with it. If you get it, then let's get it. When people get the creeping, we gon' plead the Fifth Amendment. And you niggas keep pretending you can't end
Watch him
up
drop
in
this
the
Tupac
blender.
line.
Playing till we leave them in the trash like Brendan. Till
That's
my
it.
felony offenders, no retreating, no surrender. They just trying to end ya, that's a part of the agenda.
What you think?
It's cool.
Okay, I'm gonna play you something a little bit. Splash. So look, this one, watch this. This guy is a cultural icon already. This is what I'm about to play for you. This is West Side Gun.
West Side Gun.
You ever heard of him? He's
No.
big now. He just played Coachella last week.
Oh, did he?
Oh
All
my
right.
God.
I'll have to pay attention.
He's a whole thing right now. Hold on. This is called Rolex. Mo, you filming me. This is exclusive footage, man.
Put jewels on it, who want it, want it, want it,
This is that New York street shit, though,
Oh, yeah.
Chris.
Yeah, it's good. I like it.
Wait till you hear this voice.
Hey yo, Raffin D the joints with the sawdust. Venus and Mars stars, dope in the helmet lane basket. Pioneers classic. Put a 7 on it, made it elastic. I'm the opposite of whack, yo. Your fiends taste my shit. They ain't never coming back. Facts, Ferrari, California, yeah.
Watch the drum roll.
All of this Rocky Figaro links. The bitches say I'm marvelous, dope, guitar, velour. Might put a stove in the big alley store. Need a
This is religion to me right here, though, Chris.
Yeah, that's good. Sounds like a young man.
My blood got fish like Rolex, red Supreme ups.
Yeah. Youngish.
Youngish.
It's good.
I wanted to do that because somebody one day is going to ask if you know about West Side Gun.
I know. Well, now I do.
And now
I'll check it out.
And when you run across, he's at all the wrestling matches too. He's big in the wrestling. He's front row.
Really?
At the WWE events now.
Oh, okay.
Like they took these guys 20 years to come up in the game. They finally broke through. He signed his crew to Shady a couple years ago. His cousin signed the Def Jam just recently.
Oh.
They just did Coachella. I just wanted you to be hip.
No, that's cool. No, I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
I got a few more questions. Terry Crews allowed a man to grab his junk while his wife was with him. I know Terry's not a minor, but can we set up a sting on the perv who cupped his balls?
Yeah, I think we should.
Okay. Have you heard that story?
I have.
Okay. What do you think you might do if you were standing next to your wife, somebody grabbed your balls at a party?
I wouldn't like that.
You wouldn't like it?
No.
Chris is very hesitant to say that he would beat the shit out of somebody. I'm thinking that he's going to put hands. Chris.
I think I would try not to be at that party in the first place and maybe prevent the whole ball cupping incident to start with. But
have we ever, as a country, gotten better or worse when it comes to stemming the tide of sexual abuse and trafficking of children?
I think the awareness has improved. I think the problem is so pervasive that we're treading water still. And I think during the pandemic, with more kids online than ever before, there was more opportunity for predators. And I know, factually, from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children that, the incidents exploded. And also, remember this, we have more social media platforms than ever before, and it grows every day, places where kids can be approached by adults. And that includes the simple ones, the basic ones like Instagram. We have a case right now where a 12-year-old girl was groomed on Instagram by a man who traveled up to Florida and took her to a hotel room, talked her into climbing out the window of her home.
And that's why we're happy you're still doing what you're doing.
Yeah, we're on it.
Who would win in the push-up contest between you and Al Roker?
I think I could beat him. He's a fit guy, though. He's also a lovely guy.
He's slimmed down, nice guy. Yeah. He's originally from Cleveland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a weatherman here.
Absolutely.
Very nice man. His wife is lovely as well.
Seems like he's been on TV for like 80 years.
He left here and went to Channel 4 New York and then went from there to the Today Show.
Yeah. Remember when hacky sack was a thing?
Mm-hmm.
What the fuck was that about?
I don't know. I never played it.
You never?
Never. I don't know what it is.
Did they invent that shit in Michigan?
It seems like it was around campus at the tail end of my college career, but we were mostly Frisbee people. We had Frisbees and we threw a football around, and played basketball. There wasn't a lot of. I mean, I know hacky sack was a thing. It just wasn't my thing.
Yeah. And then another thing, you somehow became endeared to the Juggalo movement.
Yes.
ICP, Insane Clown Posse, out of Michigan, if you all don't know. Apparently, you did their show.
I did.
Apparently, the Juggalos, which are their fans, love Chris Hansen.
There's a big crossover between T-cappers and Juggalos. And what you want to think that maybe this is a rough crowd that, because of the genre of music, hip-hop, rap that Insane Clown Posse does, that they would draw a rough crowd. And I went to the gathering of the Juggalos this summer, and I introduced Beanz on stage. I did a Juggalo TED Talk, if you will. Lovely people. Yeah. I mean, it could not have been nicer. My wife came with me, Gabrielle came with me, and we worked the crowd and hung out. And those guys, how I got in contact with them, with ICP in the first place, was they had made a public statement condemning a musician named Davi Vanity, who had 10 minutes of fame in the electronic world and heavy metal electronic world. And I did a big expose on him on my YouTube channel about allegations that he engaged in multiple assaults with underage girls. And there's a big criminal investigation going on now. Anyway, they made a statement. I had him on my YouTube channel, and it blew up. It was a huge, huge event. And they said to me, we just want one thing in return. Would you come into our studio and do some video stuff with us and maybe lay down a track for an upcoming record? I said, yeah, absolutely. Fair is fair. And so I got to know these guys a little bit. And they're really, first of all, they're sweethearts. I mean, yeah, their music can be violent, but not violent in the way a Stephen King film is.
Right.
It's parody.
Right.
And they actually did a song called "To Catch a Predator," which is very clever and very funny. And it comes up on my iTunes rotation on my phone, and it just sets the pace for the day. And it's violent, but it's a parody.
Right.
But it was cool. So anyway, I kind of got to be pals with them, and so we.
I think that's cool. Now let me ask you
cool.
this: what do you hope people say about you when your time in media is done?
I will hope that they say that I, in my own way, revolutionized, crime reporting. That I was clever enough and enterprising enough and hardworking enough and ballsy enough to go to places and do things that nobody else would do, and to take them into places they wouldn't get to see or hear things they wouldn't normally get to hear, and that I took them on a journey of discovery that maybe entered the mind of a criminal and allowed them to hear the voice of a victim, and that somehow it prevented them from becoming victims, either of a financial crime, a predatory sexual crime, a violent crime of any sort. And that if I generally raised awareness and created a dialogue that didn't exist before, then I'll have been a success.
Great answer. And I have to say, all jokes aside, it's been an honor,
it's
honor
great to work with you,
have you on this platform.
Thanks, Mike.
You are a journalistic icon. And I have learned so much from watching you interview people. Not only are you a great investigative reporter, a lot of people may not know that you are a master interviewer.
It's about listening.
Yeah, yeah. I think I did good on that today, did I?
You did. You did a wonderful job.
Cool.
Did a great interview.
Chris Hansen, it was great to have you on the platform, and we hope to have you on again
anytime,
someday.
My pleasure.
Thank you once again.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
That's a cut, Mikey. What's poppin'? It's your boy Mike Powers. The intro king. It's Powers.